Yeah, so I'm driving. I don't know how this is going to sound. And if you're listening to my casts or whatever, first of all, thank you. I realize that I have not been doing this frequently. And as I mentioned in the last one, if you listen to the last one, if you don't continue to pay for a subscription on these platforms, these podcasting platforms, all of your content won't save it. So there's a couple on there that I thought were really captured what I was feeling after Rachel died. A couple from a year ago, maybe a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, that were, I ended up being pretty happy with the way they came out because it captured what I was feeling at the time, and I was able to get into the whole topic and into something really important and the whole vibe that happened during Rachel's last days. But that episode got erased, so it's unfortunate. But these podcasts aren't free, and it's not that expensive. Shout out to Spreaker. They're great. For $7 a month you can continue to podcast. But I'm in the car right now, so I apologize for the sound quality. And I just wanted to talk about this whole thing, the whole pandemic. This is unprecedented, obviously, and I'm sure you've heard plenty of news from your own sources about this. But I think the people that I really think about, and I thank God for the fact that this happened now instead of while Rachel was sick. I cannot imagine this happening while Rachel was going through her chemo or her treatment. I cannot imagine anyone who's dealing with that right now. God, I think about those people daily. I have a couple friends that I know who have family members who are currently, undergoing chemotherapy, and I cannot imagine. I mean, Rachel used to have to wear a mask and gloves just leaving the chemo, her infusion, when she would go home for she spent the first 8 to 10 hours of her infusion inside the hospital, and she would receive oxaliplatin, which leaves your immune system super vulnerable, and also your nervous system super vulnerable right when you're leaving the facility. If it's very cold out, then her hands would stay cold for weeks, and she used to have to wear a mask and gloves because her immune system was so compromised. So if this pandemic hit while she was in treatment, I don't know how we would have gotten through it. And for all of those folks out there who have a family member, or if you're dealing with it yourself, cancer, and just the nightmare that comes with a cancer diagnosis, and the nightmare that comes with treatment, whether it's curative or not. Cancer treatment is still super archaic, and chemotherapy is just the worst kind of hell on your system. And then to throw a pandemic in the mix, a global scare like this, it's enough to cause a nervous breakdown for anyone who's dealing with cancer. I wish that there was more news about that. We're very concerned about the elderly, and I have friends who have lost their loved ones. I have a friend who lost his father to this already. My parents have lost a couple friends, next door neighbors, a couple that died 6 minutes apart from each other. So this is a very real, scary thing, and it affects the elderly, and we hear that constantly, and there's lots of news about that. But I worry about the people who are are diagnosed with cancer. I mean, I don't think cancer is in the news as much as it should be, or as much as people would even want it to be, because who wants to hear about cancer every day? But until someone you know is diagnosed with cancer, and I'm not talking about, maybe I am, but I'm not necessarily talking about your grandmother or your great-grandparent who is diagnosed with cancer in late in their years, 80 plus years old, and that's what takes them. I'm not saying that's any less painful, but if you know somebody whose odds of getting cancer are in the day to day, you would never imagine would be diagnosed. If you know somebody who's been diagnosed, it opens your eyes to the amount of people that are suffering from cancer in this country. Colon cancer, people in their 30s, people in their 20s even, lots of people in their 40s and 50s, lots of people. Colon cancer, breast cancer, we all know somebody who's been diagnosed with breast cancer. I lost an aunt to breast cancer, and lost her too young. She was a wonderful, wonderful woman. And I just think about the people who are dealing with that right now. Cancer, and then on top of cancer, a pandemic, a global, unprecedented pandemic and lockdown. I wonder how that must feel. It must be extremely scary for that patient and the ones who love them. If they're going through chemotherapy, my heart breaks for them. Not only is your immune system weakened and you're extremely susceptible to cold and flu and any other virus that's in the air, but your hormones, the chemo messes with your hormones, and before you have your treatment, most of the time you're injected with a heavy dose of steroids that it wreaks havoc on your hormones, which also causes major mood instability. So all of your fears, all of the things that cause you anxiety are heightened. All of the feelings, chemo wipes out all of your good chemicals as well as your bad chemicals. It wipes out all of your mood stabilizing chemicals. And I just can't imagine having to face both of these things. I just can't imagine. And those are the people that I think about every day. People joke, I have friends that joke around about this pandemic. And I'm willing to joke around about it too, to an extent. As long as we both know the severity of the pandemic, and I'm not sure many people do. Some people I joke around about this with them, but I can tell in the tone of their voice that they're well aware of how horrible this is. And not necessarily afraid of it for themselves, but aware of the entire globe grieving for someone. Everyone we know, in some sort of degree of separation, knows someone who's passed and is grieving. The entire nation is grieving and will be grieving because of this pandemic. And I just, I can't joke about it the way everyone else is, especially not publicly on a forum like Facebook or something like that. I can joke around a little bit in text form, but every day that passes and I find out more people who are affected by this, more people who have lost someone, the less I'm able to be lighthearted about the whole situation. Anybody out there who's joking about a mask or saying, I'm not scared, or It does not make you tough to not wear a mask. The requirement of wearing a mask has nothing to do with keeping you from getting, to a degree it has a little bit to do with keeping yourself safe from the spreading COVID. It has to do with the rate, with the rate of transmission. So the rate of transmission for this, let's say, for example, this is bro science. I'm not looking at data right now, but the rate of transmission, let's say, is 6 to 1. So for every one person who gets it, the average rate of transmission is 6 other people in their vicinity could get it. This is in a regular scenario. If you have it, you don't know you have it, and we're not in lockdown or being careful, and you're out in your normal day-to-day. This is why it spread so fast, because the rate was something like 3 to 1 or 6 to 1. So for every one person who gets it, they usually, on average, would spread it to three or 4 people or something like that. And so the mask thing, all the mask thing is doing is changing that rate of transmission, lowering the rate of transmission. So when you put a mask on, it means that you give a shit about the country. It means you give a shit about the globe. It has nothing to do with you being scared, or there's this weird stigma with people wearing a mask that they're selfish or thinking about saving themselves or paranoid, and it looks uncool. Well, let me tell you something. When I see someone who's not wearing a mask in the grocery store openly, or something, a bandana, and they're just casually walking around, I think that person is a fucking asshole. Like, you're a fucking asshole, and I do not think you're tough, cool, quite the opposite. If you give a shit, if you have any compassion towards anyone who's grieving or dealing with this, and you want to help, you want to do your part, put a fucking mask on. All right? And furthermore, find out who in your community is elderly, who in your community may have their compromised immune system. Find out if everyone in your... I don't know if I just got cut off there, but, I had a call coming in. I did ask. I went around to a couple houses. I was wearing a bandana. This was last week before I went to the grocery store, and I asked people, hey, especially elderly people. I had a neighbor who was outside doing some gardening, and he looked to be definitely over 60, and I said, hey, I said, first of all, I introduced myself, and he had no problem. He shook my hand, and I shook his hand because I'm terrible at... I can't refuse that. I just went home and washed my hands right away. But I asked him, I said, who do you live with? Do you guys live alone? Is your wife still... Who goes to the grocery store for you? And he said, my son lives here and he takes care of it. So, but it made me feel better that at least I asked. I asked him, and there's 2 houses down while I was on my way to the grocery store, and I pulled my car over because there was an elderly man sitting on his porch. And I hollered out to him, and I said, hey, excuse me, I'm going to the grocery store. Is there anything that you might need? And he said, no, but thank you so much for asking. Now, I'm not saying everybody should do that, or everyone's capable of doing that, and I'm not tooting my own horn. Fuck that. I'm just saying, put a goddamn mask on if you're going to the store. The least you can do is put a mask on. Yeah, and take this thing seriously. Of course you have to keep a light heart about it, but there are some people who are constantly joking, like joke after joke after joke on Facebook about this pandemic, and they don't realize that there's people really heartbroken who have lost someone in their family to this virus, and on top of that, not only just lost someone to this virus, but that person died alone. They were in quarantine and they died alone. This thing is not is nothing to joke about. People are dying alone. You can